Hello, let's talk about the English Civil War and Glorious Revolution. Remember, France had an absolute monarch, but England has a limited monarchy. And England's limited monarchy goes back into World War I. Hopefully you've heard about the Magna Carta. In fact, it's such an important document not only to English history, but to U.S. history that we actually have. There's a few copies remaining, and the National Archives in D.C. has one. So in England, the monarchy is limited. It's not a democracy, it's not a constitutional monarchy, but their power is limited. This goes all the way back. Remember how we talked about Elizabeth I and those Tudor kings and queens. All right. What we're going to see is how Parliament, so Parliament at this time is, remember, has the power. They cannot tax without the consent of the nobles. That comes with the Magna Carta. And remember, in England, Parliament is has limited power over the king. Also, England has a right to trial by jury. So the king in France, if Louis XIV decided, representative of Crown decided you were guilty, you were guilty. Louis XIV had that power. That is a power that English kings do not have. So Parliament is sharing limited power with the monarchy. Kings and queens have had constant conflict with Parliament, especially over money, because Parliament controlled the purse strings. But you also have a Puritan, those guys we talk about around Thanksgiving. Puritans, those are English Protestants who want to purify the Anglican Church. So they want to get rid of any of the Catholic practices. Remember how Elizabeth the first combined Protestant and Catholic. So we're not going to spend a lot of time with James I. He became king, had conflicts with Parliament. We're going to really focus on his son, who becomes king. And he needs money desperately. And he's ruling, so we went from James to Charles I. And in 1628, when he was king, he is forced to give Parliament or the people more rights. He needs money. He's fighting a war. They are not happy with the war. And these are the important rights the king that he's forced to sign. He's forced to agree to. I won't put people in prison without good reason. Habeas corpus. No taxes without Parliament's permission. I won't force soldiers to be housed in the homes of private citizens. No martial law in peacetime, which means the army or the military cannot control cities and things. These should look familiar. These are rights and practices that we will adopt in the U.S. But once Charles gets the money for Parliament, he says, "Yay, I have the money." He dissolves Parliament, sends them home, and he decides he's going to rule England for over 11 years without any help. And his plan is never, ever to call Parliament. But remember, Charles is king of Scotland and England, two separate countries. Well, the Scots kind of rebel. They rebel, and Charles needs money to fund his armies to put down the rebellion. So Parliament wants to give it. Parliament doesn't want to give it, because it's kind of like when you say to your mom and dad, "Oh, give me money, I'll clean out the garage." They give you money, you never clean out the garage, you go back for money, and they say no. So the causes of this war between the king and Parliament, the nobles, this civil war in England was money, because Parliament said no. the king wanted to be like an absolute ruler. He didn't want to share. And you still have that conflict with religion, with those Puritans trying to get rid of Catholic influence in England. You have the war. It begins, Parliament, there's many different parliaments. There's the short parliament. Charles gets mad, sends Parliament home. He recalls Parliament. Then you have the long Parliament, which is even more difficult than the first Parliament. And when they meet, they decide, we're done. We're going to make him do the petition of right, and we're going to take more of his power. So you have a power struggle between Parliament and between the king. Parliament's meeting, the king's not getting his money, they're not getting around. 1642, Charles has an idea. I'm going to go arrest the members of Parliament. At this point, he's violating, Parliament says, you're violating our rules. They say no. In fact, the leaders weren't there. They begin to raise an army, and Charles will flee north. You will have two sides on the Civil War. You will have the Cavaliers. When you hear Virginia Cavaliers, this is where they're coming from. They are royalists. They're loyal to the king. You have the Roundheads. They are Puritan, and they are supporters of Parliament. Your leader of the Roundheads is Oliver Cromwell, who will lead the successful army that will defeat Charles. As a result, Charles will be put on trial and he will be executed in 1649. Charles's children will flee England. Charles will argue that Parliament didn't have the power to put him on trial because he's appointed by God, divine right. Remember, the English are saying, no, we have rule of law, you didn't obey the law, and they execute Charles. We can guess the verdict. He is found guilty and executed. Then, okay, now we're going to have democracy. No, Cromwell, remember, controls the military. England did draft a constitution to make it the first state to rule without a king. However, Charles tore it up, and he decided to create the perfect society, the Puritan society. Religious toleration for everybody except Catholics. Oh, and he canceled Christmas, the theater, very strict religious form. But he's trying to reform society and morality. And you can't sometimes legislate morality. So then, actually, Cromwell, you actually get even a stronger, he becomes a military dictator. So it will be a military dictator. So it's kind of like he's the king, but he doesn't have the title. After Cromwell dies in 1658, the English are like, we don't want this anymore. We don't want the Puritans. We want to bring the king back. So Charles II's son is still alive. He is over in the mainland of Europe, France, and Parliament asks him to come back and rule. The period is called the Restoration, woohoo, and it is celebrated. So you went from the English Civil War, Charles executed, to Cromwell being a military dictator, to Charles II coming back. Part of when he returns, he has to agree to obey the petition of right. That's one of this. Also, he has to agree to habeas corpus, and we even have that in our Constitution. Habeas corpus is the idea that if you are arrested for a crime, you are to be brought before a judge. That judge is to determine if there is enough evidence to go forward with the trial. And habeas corpus was passed by Parliament. Prisoners were given rights, and the monarch could not put someone in jail for opposing him. So he has the petition of rights, the petition of right that he had to agree to. Remember, that was the document his father signed and refused. So the petition of right, these are the, Charles had to agree to these, and then he also had to agree to habeas corpus, Parliament's freedom, some rights for and protections for prisoners, and not putting people in jail for not liking him. So everything was going great. However, while I say Charles II, I call him the Merry Monarch because he had lots of children. He had none with his wife. So his brother James II is to inherit the throne. Now, the English don't like Catholics. They don't want a Catholic on the throne. The last Catholic they had on the throne was Bloody Mary. James II is Catholic. But they know James II is Catholic, but he has a Protestant daughter who would rule next. All right? He is opposing constitutional monarchy. He thinks he should be absolute. All right? And you have two political parties emerging, the Whigs and the Tories. The Whigs want constitutional monarchs. The Tories are supporting of the monarch. These are the original political parties. So the Tories are supporting James. The Whigs are saying, no, we don't want him. And remember, he's Catholic. James II is having also, he has money problems like Charles I. He wants money for an army that Parliament doesn't support. He's also trying, because remember he's Catholic, he's not obeying Parliament's laws. He's appointing Catholics to public office. Finally, but they're like, we just have to get through James and we'll get to Mary. But James did the unthinkable. He was remarried and he had a son. That son takes precedence, and the Parliament said, not again. They wrote to James's daughter, Mary, and her husband, William of Orange, and asked them to save them. And that is where you get the Glorious Revolution. So you go English Civil War, Restoration. So English Civil War is Charles I, Oliver Cromwell. Restoration, Charles II, James II, Glorious Revolution. James II said, run away. He flees because he sees he has no support. He doesn't want to die like his father. He is overthrown, and William and Mary will take the English crown. However, they will have to sign a Bill of Rights, which is they will actually be constitutional monarchs. Parliament power will be created and a cabinet will be created. So William and Mary, the English Bill of Rights, it formalizes, can't suspend Parliament's laws, Parliament must govern with you, you cannot interfere with freedom of speech, you cannot punish citizens for petitioning the king, and we're going to go more into detail looking at how these look like. You're going to be I don't think you're going to be shocked if you put petition of right, habeas corpus, and English Bill of Rights together. It's going to look very similar to some of the rights we have in our country today. Thank you.